Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is a track from scratch. Now that we have started with this drums, we're gonna do some basses. I'm thinking the kind of like electro I'm feeling. I'm calling it electro, and lots of people have taken issue with what I mean by that. But the kind of thing I'm hearing about right now is a kind of more like a rhythmic experience with the bass against these kicks. Trying to think if I want to go straight into hardware shenanigans, and I think the answer is I do. So let's do that. Let's talk about how that even happens. Right now, pretty sure the MIDI is selected correctly. Believe me, I'm going to show you how all these connections work in a second. Make sure the number is right. 10. Do you work? You do. Alright, let's go to hardware view for a second. Swing. Ha! Alright, so the hardware view. Oh, well, okay, hold on. Step one. Lav mic would make this easier. Okay, now theoretically I should be able to face this direction, and you should be able to hear me at the same time. Ugh. Okay. Derp. Alright. Now, let's talk about the MIDI setup. In FL, I picked MIDI channel 10, or rather port 10, and that's because way back here, in freaking cable wasteland back there, I guess we need to be a little higher, I have this guy, and I have this guy. So this is just a 1x1 MIDI in out M audio or MIDI thing I've had for years and years. It just adds the MIDI output. And then this is a particular kind of MIDI device that's specifically designed to interact with phones. Like it has a double USB host input so that you can use a phone as a host and then control another host with the phone. So on and so forth, different versions. The reason I got it is because I wanted to use iPad's Touch OSC or Lemur, one of those guys with the modular stuff, and you can do that with this Expert Sleepers FH1 if you can USB it into it, if you can actually get the MIDI in there. The reason for this crazy setup, even though my freaking audio interface over here, the RME 802, Fireface 802, has a dedicated regular old MIDI out, I couldn't just MIDI cable it into this guy to USB into this guy. Ultimately, is what I'm trying to do. Because for some reason the timing was just bonkers, and I think it had something to do with the way that the tracking worked with my driver settings or whatever. But for some reason, doing it like this works. And the end result that we get is that when I put play notes inside FL, this blue thing lights up. Let's actually get us in there, huh? Nope, like that, like that, like that. Oh, wow, can I not get that far enough over? That's something we'll have to deal with, but yep, blue thing. Now, every time I hit a note, those two top guys light up. The top guys represent individually pitch and gate. The gate is just a trigger. It just means that, like, oh, this thing is doing a thing now. And in particular, the thing that we're going to make it do is be heard. I am linking pitch to this guy next to it. This dude is called a buffered mult. The reason it's buffered is because it's powered. That it's powered, it means when I put a very delicate signal into it that needs to kind of be the same, if I want two things to be the same, like pitch into it, it keeps it the same as it was when it came out. Regular mults that are unpowered, like this dude, just chilling, it multiplies the signal. When you put it inside one of those jacks, it comes out the other three, that same signal. But if you keep taking it out, it cuts the signal. And the signal's level is actually a parameter's position in the modular world. And for pitch, that means that your pitch changes if your level is different. So your tuning could just be gone if you're not paying attention to it. Like that. in this case, I'm doing that because I want to use the DPO. And I want this guy to be in front of the DPO. Okay. DPO. So, these two guys here are controlling the 1 volt per octave input, which is to say that it determines what an octave is, like what pitch it is, because from 1 volt to the next, like here's 1 volt, here's 2 volts, this is 1 octave range, 3 volts next octave, 4 volts next octave, and then like a fraction of those volts is what makes the pitches in between. That's how it tracks pitch. There is actually a way for it to follow the pitch of this guy. Like if I made this pitch in here but not this guy, I can make this dude follow it, but it does so not quickly. So now let's put in a line here in FL. Boink. Although I guess before we do that, we have to tune it, and before we do that, we have to set it up so that we can hear it. So tuning wise, this is how I do this. I open up a synth and just kind of play it. Next to it, this tuning process is basically the same way that you tune like an instrument. 1 go. Whoops. So we're doing basses, so I'm going to actually tune to a bass note. This is more important than you might realize, because some oscillators drift a bit if you go outside a certain range, because range is a matter of power. And if your cheapo, if your oscillator is cheapo or whatever, and it doesn't have as much power, then it doesn't have the range of other oscillators for other reasons. So you can have an octave stack. Oh, can the following be offset? It's slow. It's like a glide time more than anything. So no, it couldn't just be like it's a fraction of the thing and then it's a bit different pitch. Although you could do that manually. You could put your 1 volt per octave signal into a VCA and then make that VCA lower and clone it and make that other one normal, and then you can do yourself 1 chord for one thing. Although tuning that would be a pain in the butt. But there's actually a piece of hardware that does that, and it's called a precision adder. When there's adders and then there's precision adders. Adders do what it sounds like. Precision adders very specifically are designed to make things like adding pitches together work musically. So if you wanted to do something like I made an ARP, and then you wanted to add, like, say now you're changing the root note of that ARP, you need a precision adder so that when you play a different root note, it correctly adjusts it towards the actual musical note. The hell were I doing? Oh yeah, hearing this thing. All right, this is where we start to get cables involved. Let's go back to hardware land. Oh wait, no, I gotta put down a note. In fact, specifically that note. Put you next to the tuner. And then maybe now we can go back to hardware view. Is that freaky or what? Okay, so I put inside my DAW, inside FL, 8-at-1 as the output that I'm using. So in this stack over here, I got my RME over here. This is the actual audio interface that everything is going into. And inside here, it has 2 8-at inputs. An 8-at input is usually an 8-channel light pipe thing. Like, it actually uses optical cable. There's varying ranges of what 8-at can do depending on what thing you plug into it. But these dudes are little 8-input microphone inputs. And they are just very, very, like, not special. They're just that. They're just that is what they are. And this means that you can plug these as essentially like a snake into here, which is one cable. The patch bay back here has a whole bunch of 1/4" to XLR short cables so that when I plug in specifically one of these guys, this in particular is 8-at-1. And it's going into one of these guys, which goes into this guy, which is going into FL. Someone in the chat says, I remember playing Overwatch with you. And I'm like, I bet you do, because I play a lot. I love the shit out of that game. Hey, check it out. You can hear it now. I've taken the saw wave output of this guy and I've put it straight out. So there's no volume control. There's still a pitch control because we have set it. Hey, it's already kind of a tune. I guess I did this recently. So what I was doing there to tune that is I was listening for the phase cancellation. That kind of like thing you're hearing was the result of the thing not being the same pitch as the other thing. And me slowly changing the tuning on this guy, like you would tuning just a regular guitar, was me just being like, is it like how fast is it doing that effect? The slower the effect, the more in tune you are. So now that thing's in tune. Okay, so now that we have that, we want to, like, when we trigger it, we want it to trigger like it does with Harmer. When we play a note, it plays the sound. When we don't play a note, it doesn't play the sound. What's happening right now is it's just playing sound. So we gotta put stuff in the chain to make that happen. Let's get the camera out here so we can see this. All right. So down here, so there, I do have a bit of a setup philosophy for what's in what case here. Like up here is where control and generation occurs. These are the sequencers. These are some drums and some more sequencers and envelopes and whatever. But these are all oscillators. This is all my oscillator stuff. And then down here is all the processing stuff. This is where the filters and effects and lots of stuff that happens to sound exists, including the VCAs. All right. Come on. Cool. So, I'm going to take the output that we were using for that saw wave there, and we're going to put it into number 1. And I'm going to miss. Nope. Ah, there it is. You can see it doing it. So, a VCA is called a VCA because it stands for Voltage Controlled Amplifier. And what we're going to do here, these controls that exist, we have in, out, pretty obvious, and then CV. What CV does is when there's an input, the volume that it gets is determined by how much the level inside the CV. This is what the gate control was for earlier. So what actually, how this is going to work is I'm going to plug this into an ADSR. Actually, it's just a and an R. I'm going to take the CV input, to the VCA. I'm going to plug it into the envelope out. Trigger 1 here. Envelope out, like this is just a decay and an attack, and then either it, there's actually a tension curve setting up here, and then this dude sets whether it will sustain or not. So it'll either not sustain and just pluck and be done, or it'll sustain however long you hit the note. And then there's one where it just kind of oscillates like an LFO. I usually have it on sustain mode. And this is what the gate is for. When I go to hit the gate inside FL, by playing the project, that light lights up. I'm trying to get the hang of actually using the angles here. Yeah. Nope. Yeah. There it is. See that light lighting up? That's the gate. And we're going to take that. We're going to plug it into trigger 1. And now when I hit the gate, it triggers the ADSR, well, the A and the R. And now the output is gonna go trigger CV. And now, when I take the output of this dude and put him into 8-1, let's actually not use this cable. Let's use a longer one. And I hit notes. Nothing, because I muted it. Hey. Now it responds like an actual synth. So like this is what's required to get like basic functionality out of an analog synth. And I say analog, not just modular, because analog stuff is doing this. The whole point of modular is that you have the control of all of these components, but this is still what the chain is inside an analog synthesizer. Now we can start messing with it. Yeah. So let me do some kind of rhythmy thing first with this. Although I tend not to want to do this, just because I'm not going to know how much I want of my rhythm until I hear the sound. But let's just do a little bit of that to have a placeholder. And the mouse froze. Sounds like Harmer. There's no filtering going on. It does sound like a saw wave, though. I'll tell you what. All right. Also, of perhaps not the best plan for me is because we're using hardware. The latency of hitting a note and having it come out is going to be pretty epic. Even if it's tiny, even if it's not a lot, it's going to kind of be a problem. So we're going to have to record it. We're going to have to record a lot of things. And keep them as just the thing. And we're going to lose a lot about what we do, like presets and whatnot. And that's just the nature of the stuff. I'm just doing this to get an idea of what I want to do. What the hell was that song that they had that? I guess that was Dreams of Bass, wasn't it? Yeah, that would work if I did this. I guess a fill thing, but whatever. I did that already. Don't need to do it again. This is real basic, it's true. But I need a thing so I can hear it when I'm designing. Well, now I have this in my head. Do I want to go to 6? I don't know if I want to go to the 3. Good old 3, 4. Mission Impossible. Let's see, this is like the end. This is like the 4th thing going on, right? Let's start simple. Do reverb. Or writing that metal song. See how that kind of the timing was a little bit weird? Part of that is latency, and part of that is for some reason the MIDI not wanting to really. Actually, that's kind of a. Key of X minor, yeah. Alright, well, now that we had this, let's try and do some hardwaring. Alright, so we're triggering the DPO. Yeah, close enough. So right now we've been using the saw output. Oh wow, okay, this thing being right in front of it's gonna be kind of weird, but this is sort of what I signed up for. The DPO's whole thing, it's a pretty like two oscillators in a synth is pretty common when it comes to analog and hardware stuff. But what the DPU is it got this whole wave shaper system built in, and then the final output is a signal path of these two going into that business and then going out. And then a lot of the things going on in here are about internally controlling things like FM. Let's move it back a little. Well, I really kind of want to see the parameters. Like, I could just explain everything I'm doing in real time. I guess that's been my whole life, but, you know, if you could see what I'm doing, that'd be better. Okay. So, like, now when I play this, it's freaking out because I think it's being FM'd. And actually, number 2, I think, is the primary oscillator coming out of here, and number 1 was the one we were hearing, and it is out of tune. So see that light up here? It's actually showing us the phase between the two oscillators. It's combining the signal in that little light there. And it'll be hard for you to see what I see because of the frame rate, but I'm basically doing that phase cancellation timing thing with the tuning that I was doing with the sound earlier, but I'm doing it visually. So that now they're in tune. And I didn't have to hear it. You can actually do that with any oscillator you want if you have a VCA that's got a light on it, like the one that we were looking at. So the kind of wave shaping that goes in here is a kind of folding business that goes on. And then over here is like the folding modulation. And then there's a bunch of stuff that controls it. Actually, this is not the mod bus at all. That's what this is. What this is the internal, how much modulation is coming into this whole system. These white knobs imply how much modulation is being imparted onto that particular parameter. Here's the wave shaper tone. Sound familiar? And then here's asymmetry. One of those parameters that you mostly hear the effect of when you move. And then this controls the total input modulation, and these white things control individual input modulation. And that modulation is coming from, right now, the first oscillator, I'm pretty sure. Now, someone in the chat asked what was the first piece of modulator gear I got, and the first piece of modulator gear I got was the DPO. And the reason why I got it was because the first time I ever touched a piece of modular gear, it was actually in Cell Dweller's studio, and he had DPO and a bunch of other stuff. And I remarked that using it was like calling it like the noisier box. And later I discovered this is just a hardware thing that is really hard to do things that aren't Reese's. For example, because of what I was saying before about the tuning, if we kind of move the tuning a bit. So that exact paradigm of this is essentially the modulation index and then individual modulation control exists over here too. Only this guy exists to serve the FM from one oscillator to the other. So this is FM. There's two kinds of FM. There's linear and exponential, and there's a difference, and I forget what. But exponential is way crazier. You might have thought to yourself, why didn't that sound like FM like I'm used to it? Why didn't that sound like a clean, why did that change pitch? Because that's what it did. And some nature of regular FM, when I say regular, I mean literally modulating the pitch that fast, which is not what digital FM does, changes the pitch of it. So if I want that to work, if I want the FM sound, I have to change the oscillator I'm modulating. Oh my god, someone just subscribed. Oh, you're a Prime user. What's going on? Senor Sirient. Sirent? Sirent? Okay. Alright, now actually I'm going to look at that ADR for a second, the enveloper, because it's not as sharp as I want it to be. Alright. I think a good next step for this guy is distortion. So, I'm starting to get really annoyed with that MIDI. Probably going to end up doing something very different than that. Or I might forget and get too used to it and that'll be the song. But whatever, either way, we'll make it work. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the input coming out of the DPO, and I'm going to unplug it from the VCA because I want the VCA to be the end for the time being. And I'm gonna plug this in now into the torcido, and I'm gonna plug the torcido into the input here. So now we put the torcido in the chain. This would be like adding an effect inside FL and then scrolling up and putting it in between two things you already had. Torcido. Distortion partner, torcido. Okay. And of course you can't see what I'm doing, my hand's doing it. Jeez. Alright, so things got two basic controls. It got this distortion tone and distortion amount. Got this like kind of warm knob. Yeah, it even has buzzwords on the faceplate. Tell me about it. Dude, modular stuff is all buzzwords, and like I don't even really blame them for it because people like I guess there are people who are like me that get this stuff to actually do stuff with, but for the most part it really seems like most people have hardware because they just want to fiddle with stuff. That's a perfectly fine impulse, but those same individuals tend not to want to know about what stuff's doing because they want to just fiddle and have things happen, and to that end that's fine. Again, not knocking it, but they tend to label things in a way that's not very technical. This is the dry wet here. But note that every one of these parameters has a CV input. So let's do something cool. Like, take one of these cables. I call these guys bloogies. There might be an actual tube in this thing, to be fair. It's possible. I don't actually know. It's Roland. Anyway, taking one of these, and I'm going to plug it into the distortion amount. Rather, color. This is distortion color. And I am going to plug that into the triangle wave coming out of oscillator 1. Right, this time, I'm just going to put a sustain note so you can hear what this sounds like. Just for kicks, here's what the saw wave sounds like. And here's what the sine wave sounds like. And then also you could do things like FM, the distortion amount. And dry wet and all that and whatever. Typically though I like to do this guy, and I'm going to do the triangle. The reason I'm choosing the triangle, again, I mentioned earlier about how analog FM is different than digital FM, and one of the ways that it's different is that the shape is a literal translation of how it's going to move the thing. And if you can sort of envision in your head how certain things sound sharpness-wise, sometimes the sharpest thing isn't always the best thing. Sometimes being starting it with a sort of a smoother slope on something like a triangle wave can add up doper results later in the line. So you might have thought, while I was moving that around, why, like, that sounded kind of cool while I was modulating it. Would that be neat if I could modulate it? And how the hell could I do that if I already have something in there FMing like that? And the answer to that question is twofold. There's two kinds of ways. The first sort of fun way is this thing. This is called a stack cable. It's got the regular old input on it, but then it has an input on top. And you can do a number of things with this particular thing. What it's sort of meant to do is to clone an output of something, kind of like a mult, but individual. But also you can clone inputs. You can make this thing go into an input, and then you can have something else come on top of it. It would have to be a specific signal to make that work, because, again, the signal that is the voltage that's controlling the parameters is the same signal that is just an oscillator. So you have to essentially add in like the DC offset, just the thing, along with the triangle wave inside the VCA mixer into an output that combines it into the modulation input, and then you can control the amounts or whatever, and you see how the complexity builds. I deleted the MIDI line from what we were doing. We're definitely gonna write something, but we're gonna do some sound design with that music first. Yeah, so that's distorted. What else do I want to do before the fun? Nothing, I guess. So that means the fun, and the fun is blocked by this cable. Come on, there you go. How did that happen? It was just stuck on that cable. Okay. Reverb. So like my 3 favorite modules of all of these, and I have a lot as you can see, are the DPO, the Korgasmatron, of which they have a new version that I don't have that's actually better, and this guy, the Reverb. And this is actually still going to go before the VCA. Normally I put the reverbs after the VCA if I actually want to use them like reverb, but in this case I don't. I'm going to use it like a piece of modulation. Come on, get in the cable. There we go. Cool. Yay. So here's the reverb. So this unit is great. It's like it's a little bit like a Valhalla room and shimmer combined at the same time. It actually has a shimmer thing, like this knob does. On all the way to the right, it's all the way shimmer, which we can't hear because I'm not doing it past the VCA. But it has a lot of that functionality, and a lot of it can be modulated. P.S. though, there's confusion to be had about the word hardware, the word modular, and the words analog. This is not analog. This is a digital piece of thing, and you can tell because there are no analog reverbs in this form factor. Like there's a thing called a spring reverb, which actually puts a signal through a literal steel spring, and that's why it sounds like reverb. It's kind of cool sounding. It's very old school and retro-y. And you could have modules that do it, but they plug out into the literal spring. It's a physical thing that exists. And then other kinds of non-digital reverbs are things like plate reverb, which is actually, again, having a physical plate in the room to increase the reverberation time before it gets to a microphone because you've put it in front of something. And then my favorite line that I say is that analog reverb is get a bigger room. So when you see things like this, it's actually a digital piece of hardware. A lot of these are digital, so it's not all what if it's a tiny spring? It'll be the world's shortest reverb. It won't be the world's shortest, but it'll be short. If you Google spring reverb, and like Dope Fur makes some spring tanks. That's what they're called, tanks. Gold foil plate reverbs. Huh. There's no spring tank in this. No, there is not. All right. So the basic parameters are still pretty the same. Like, there's the size, there's decay time, and then there's a bunch of sort of specific stuff like this absorb function, which you can read the manual for this thing and it tells you sort of what stuff does and does not do. But what it kind of does is it's like the dampening function of a regular reverb, but it takes away the energy. It really, it's not just a filter. It's not just like a dampening filter. It does some stuff. But the goal of using it in a bass like this is that I'm going to take all those parameters and sort of use them in short form. As a kind of phasery modulation type almost. Now, along with that, these guys have their own CV inputs, including the freaking size, the reverb size. Which when you move it around, kind of sounds like the reverb filter, doesn't it? There's reasons for that. Bet you didn't think you could have that in Modular World. I need a long enough cable. So let's link size to... can't reach it. Wow, okay. Guess I'm using the super long one. size to a saw. So I was going to say, imagine being able to FM the position of the reverb filter inside Serum, but turns out you can actually do that. Because in the modulation matrix, there's a source that you can choose that's the noise oscillator. So you can use the noise as a modulation. Thing is, though, is that you can load your own audio files as noise files. So you can just load a saw wave as a noise file. And you can use that as a modulation source inside Serum. So this knob, this was made by the same company that made DPO, by the way, which is why it has the same knobs. This is a bipolar knob. This is actually called an attenuverter. So one of those regular white ones up there that aren't bipolar are just called attenuators, and the ones that are bipolar, which are essentially allow you to phase invert the signals, the modulation signal, are called attenuverters. And this allows us to just change the phase of the modulation input, which, like, if you don't have one of these inside the synth, then you have to have another module that does that if you want to change the phase of your waveform. Or pick an oscillator that has the correct phases to begin with. Now we're getting somewhere fun. See how when I turn this up, it got kind of smoother? Because when it's down, it's just it comes off. It sounds a little bit more like a more white noisy kind of reverb, and it's short. But when it dampens a bit, it actually kind of smears it across as such. Yeah, I kind of like that. So the kind of fun thing about this is it has a stereo output, and I kind of want to use it. To that end, because if I just trigger this output, because this is going, this is from, okay, so that ends it there. I'm trying to think of the best way. No, that could still work. That could totally still work. So I'm going to take, so here's a use for the stack cable, right? Back to the VCA, because this is a VCA thing. I want two inputs essentially, but that means I need two triggers. Both envelopes need to trigger two different VCAs. So this is the issue. This is the issue with stereo when you do modular, or rather any kind of hardware stuff, is that, like, if it's not a polysynth, a digital polysynth that just has internally more than one voice, you need to have literally more than one of what you're doing. And if you don't, you're kind of SOL. Losing all my cables. All right. Output into A.2. Oh my god, is that really not reach? Like, so much ado has been made about me trying to make this work ergonomically so that I could do this without much hassle. I mean, there's going to be some hassle. Hardware might as well be called hassleware. I am still recording, right? Okay. It's been a while. See, this is what I mean. That first video with doing drums wasn't very long, but then this one where I'm doing, like, this one bass, it takes kind of a while. And, like, my original plan was to not continue a track after I've done it, like, once. But we'll see how far we get. Alright, so now I gotta change my input from A.1 into A.1 and 2, so it will be stereo. And it's not. Because I put the CV into the input. That's not what I wanted. Back to the volumes, please. Thank you, good, cool. And A.1 and 2 are different levels. I guess I should have, here, I'll just do the dry signal, because that should be not stereo. I guess I need the pads. Remember, kids, look both ways when you gain stage the street. Alright. There it is. Cool. So let's zoom out for a second and look at this whole freaking chain that we've done. Or at least as much of it we can get in one shot. Alright, so to recap. We are triggering via MIDI from within FL into two different MIDI interfaces to get out of this thing pitch and gate. Pitch is going by these two cables outside of a multiplier to code the signal to be the same inside the powered mult into the DPO. The DPO's final output, which is a combination of the oscillators and the wave shaping that exists inside it, being modulated within itself, is coming out and going into the torcido. Torcido is being modulated in its distortion by one of the waveforms from the DPO, and then it's going into the reverb, which is coming out stereo with two cables and two envelopes and two VCAs, and the two inputs, which is coming now to where we are inside FL. The sound. The sound. Yeah. And it's a little quiet, so we're gonna turn it up. Where, though? All of it is turned all the way up. I guess we're not gonna turn it up. So, now this part is where I do internal processing, because I like how this sounds. This specific sound. Now I want to actually use the damn thing. If I had, like, if I was, I don't know, bored, something I do sometimes when I am bored is I'll do this and then I'll make a direct wave patch of it. I'll just play some extended notes and then that'll be like the actual sound. This time though, we're just gonna make patterns and record them. Alright, this isn't gonna be totally accurate, but because I wanna, just for the sake of mocking this up, I want to hear what this sounds like with sidechaining. Shift click keeps things vertically locked. Let's just do one of these first. Yeah, forget being musical, let's be metal. Alright, so let's actually, assuming this is what I want. Do I want to skip right to recording it here? I guess it's probably the best plan. Because the timing is important for a lot of this. Also, given the vaguely random nature of analog and hardware and that kind of thing, recording things multiple times is pretty much a good idea. Is a guaranteed to get you a different version of what you're doing. So like there is value in sort of tracking. See this epic delay here? This is why we recorded it. gonna do a little better than that. You see how this is sort of weirdly off time and that kind of thing. Like some of that is just hardware being hardware, but some of that is also just the way that the software speaks to the hardware not being totally great. How do I want to deal with that? I guess I'm going to have to do this. See, this is the kind of stuff that I normally I save for, like, you know, fixing instrumentalists work, like timing wise for people playing things. But again, remember, if you go into hardware, you are asking for this. Jensen doesn't get to come in and say, I didn't ask for this, because you hell asked for this. No. Cool. That's better. Yeah. Oscillators are just on. And they're only ever off because you turn the volume down. But they're always on. They're always moving. This is slightly dangerous to be compressing stuff this quiet. Not so much that normalizing it helped. So to explain what I just was having a problem with there. I guess I could have upped the pots a bit, but when you take a very quiet signal, something that's that low, and you jack it all the way up, it's like blowing up a 480p video to 1080p size or a 4K size. You're expanding the bit depth bit, and so if you do that and you kind of get this like bit crushy texture out of it, that's why, because you're kind of crushing the bits. You're telling it that the range of bits it was when it was at that low ass level is the entire range it needs to be when you bring it all the way up to 0 dB, which is why I was like, it's a little dangerous to be doing this, but who cares about that danger? I might not use this sound like as like a main thing. I might have this like going against something else. Gotta love that phase perfection. See, like, actually, let's go see what the noise is like inside that file. There's just some activity you can see in the low end. This is mostly just like the offset kind of bringing itself back a bit. Barely see any activity in the levels here. Alright, let's see what kind of variations we can get with the sound, because we can still use the same source, but make it slightly different. Give me that spectrum. All right, let's go back to hardware view. Fwam. How's the camera business working out so far for you guys? That's a nice little variation. So we were doing that, and we were doing that in the same patch, like in the same channel, freaking path, as the other guy. So we're just gonna keep that in there. Oh yeah, I forgot. How off are you? Pretty off. So just to see if there's any like actual detectable problem with the phase when I do that, let's actually listen to the original versus this guy with the side chaining on, because that's, you know, the context you have. Science. So here's our perfected version. Here's the version that's just direct. Ooh, could you hear a difference? I don't know that I could. Like, the side chaining is killing most of the interaction it has in the beginning of the note, but except for the ones that are in between, you know? That's definitely more on point. In fact, if the difference you detected in there was that there was somehow a bigger stereo click, that's the difference. That's why this guy sounded like that, because his hits were not completely aligned, and so we heard it separate from other elements. It's the same patch, it's the same signal path, so it's not the actual thing isn't different. I guess we're going to separate the subs for these eventually, so I don't have to worry so much about that. So, like, what do I want to do with this is the question. I guess I have to fix it before I do that. Well, that kind of makes it, that actually helps, because the next step is to kind of pick and choose which hits are being, like, allowed through. And if I've already sort of separated them like this, that makes that job a little bit easier. Because I can just mute, unmute. The red, when you shift do that, it deletes the shortest part, and sometimes I incorrectly estimate which part of it is shorter. Doo-doo-doo. Doo-doo. Doot. Am I still in hardware view? Damn it. I was really thought I was on point. This is what's called comping. It is exactly called comping. You know, there are a lot of pretty direct similarities between audio processing and visual processing, and this is kind of one of them, the comping business. I guess it's really any kind of detailed art. It's going to require that. That's a little weird, isn't it? You're going to hear a little bit of you at the end. I guess the next note it hits is... Oh, no, that's the 7, isn't it? Yeah, weird. Is that leaning to you guys? A little bit. This is gonna be like a rhythmic thing, like it's like yeah. Is that the hats doing that? Oh, the hats are like center as fuck, so it's the reverb or something. Ah. It's all low, so I have a hard time hearing it. We'll have to deal with that when we get the mixing. So actually, I think some of these I might want to do like alternate. And then like actually, we could solve the balance problem pretty quickly by just doing that, I think. And it should... That should at least make it a little balance better. Okay. So this was the original MIDI for that. I'm not going to remember this because I guess I'm going to need to keep the sub around. Might as well just not lose the pattern. Or hell, I could just skip straight to sub. Oops. Wow, playing that low kind of sounded dope. Those high notes actually kind of work out at that pitch. I wonder, a little much. Kind of sounds like a bass guitar, like tuned way down too low. Someone in the chat was mentioning the drums not necessarily being up to stuff yet, and I would not worry about that because we have done 0 mixing. Because we need so many more elements before I can know how to like put this on. So actually, I just realized that I'm not gonna want these hits on the beginning. So this is gonna be a completely different sound. So I basically just planned ahead for my variances on sound design. I want a kind of like longer like thing hitting here with some more effects and things going on. Same thing there, and then a wholly separate thing to go here that ends the phrase. I've planned ahead. When doing that process myself, I get ear fatigue pretty quick. Do you have any tips to ease my sessions? Listen quieter. Like until you get to the part where you're doing the mix. Like if you're just doing sound design and stuff, you really can't be paying attention in mix. As I was mentioning earlier, when you do stuff in a vacuum, when you put stuff again later, you're going to change things. So the returns diminish a lot faster before you do the mix than otherwise. So the freaking advice is to not worry so much about it until you get to that point. And then you can listen quieter because you're not worrying about how it feels and how it's coming at you and whatever, and you can just worry about the sound design and your ears don't get so tired. Something, yeah, all right. So that seems like... That seems like good enough for this part. I'm gonna call it, and then we're gonna do the next part. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And as usual, have a nice day.